So, Reddit. Literally everyone has heard of Reddit, the internet's gossip column, or possibly the most reliable source of all the happenings around the world. If you want to catch up on the next best furry trend, or want to take down the fat cats of Wall Street and gain a Netflix documentary, Reddit always has you covered. The average Reddit user is probably just surfing for memes, but every now and again we get a small number of people that just take their internet shenanigans to the next level and become vigilante heroes and just straight up detectives, like some kind of online Columbo. These are some of the most insane but kind-hearted stories to ever grace the face of Reddit. But of course, before we get into the stories, I would just like to say and give a massive shout out to everyone that commented on my last video as we hit a milestone. I finally beat my most popular upload, which by the way was 10 years ago, but to be fair isn't, a great achievement because I've been kind of inconsistent, but nevertheless a huge great thank you to everyone that viewed, commented, liked and subscribed. You are true ones and you know who you are. Also, I have started a Patreon, so take a look at that. I'll probably upload different kinds of things, maybe little sneak peeks behind the scenes, or even give you a poll of what video you want next. I don't know, but anybody who subscribes to the Patreon will get their name in the next video. So yeah. So now onto the story. Back in the stone age of the internet, or 2007, we see what is probably the first true concerted effort as a digital force of nature to come together and change the world in the most silliest of ways possible, honestly. But isn't that what Reddit is truly for? So here's the story about Mr. Splashy Pants, the Greenpeace whale. The whole story is wholesome through and through. You may know that there is a bit of a fishing problem widely known to be taking place in and around Japan, and their controlled waters do indeed have sharks, dolphins, whales and pretty much all of the above. But the difference is they're targeted pretty brutally in that part of the world. In a bid to stop the hunted parties to continue to operate in the area, Greenpeace, an environmental agency, decided to use satellite tracking on an individual whale, and to raise awareness they decided to create a poll online to allow the public to choose a name for the humpback. A pretty noble cause, wouldn't you say? Initially, the names on the poll that were fan favourites were the names of ancient gods such as Humphrey, Libertad and Iko, but there was just one exception to the choices. This is where Mr. Splashy Pants enters the frame. With the absurdness of the name being so off the wall in comparison to the competition, places like Dig, Boing Boing, and eventually Reddit went wild for the idea of such a silly name. With the idea of the poll and the name going completely viral, I'll give you no points in guessing which one actually won. Eventually, the poll ended with 150,000 votes, with 120,000 of those votes going just on Mr. Splashy Pants itself. Ultimately, the campaign was a raging success, raising awareness of the issue to millions from around the web. The virality of the story was studied and turned into a TED Talk by the Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian, one of the earliest examples of the coming togethers of the silly part of the internet to achieve something truly remarkable. On the 12th of June 2009, a Reddit post was created by a user going by the name StylesJP, who we would come to know as John. In the post, he pleads for help in keeping his mum's family business going. The business was called Soapia, a soap production business. The company seemed to be in dire straits, with the economy going down the pan. The whole situation put the small company into hard times, and it even resulted in John's mum falling behind on her mortgage and her rental unit for the company. So John done what any other reasonable person would do and call out to Reddit for help, but he didn't exactly have much hope for the outcome turning out to be good, even saying that the post will probably be downvoted into oblivion. But this couldn't have been further from the truth. The post got picked up by the gods of Reddit and it blasted its way to the top, garnering over 1,000 upvotes and hundreds of comments, mostly in the support of Soapia. In the post, John had mentioned he had set up a coupon code for 25% off of all purchases specifically made for Reddit. Ultimately, the post changed Soapia's entire year, putting a smile on everybody's faces that was part of the Soapia family. They had achieved numbers greater than their best month ever in just 2 days. So you could say Soapia seems to be on an upward trajectory for the next 12 months, right? By using the Wayback Machine, it looked like it was business as usual for Soapia until a post was made about Soapia asking what happened to the brand. Luckily, once again, John had replied, claiming that they had sold the company to another Redditor sometime before April 2012, and he was happy that his mum is happy with the outcome. Unfortunately, it seems that the new management didn't quite work out as well as intended, as the brand no longer exists, and to be quite honest, it's actually quite hard to find any trace of it outside of the actual Reddit post, which just feels kind of odd. But yeah, that was the time that Reddit got together to help out a small, struggling family business. This story is pretty layered actually. So on the surface, what happened is that one kind lady Redditor by the username of Silly Rabbit agreed to take in a homeless man, only known as Clown or Patrick. She explains that she's been in a similar situation in her life, so it's her way of giving back to the community. Well, this backfired. Back on the 28th of January 2009, a post was created by a man that appeared to be down on his luck, alluding to a blog he had made asking for help due to his dire situation, being homeless. This is when Silly Rabbit commented on the blog on RSS, offering him a place to stay at her apartment, which is a great thing to do, honestly. I mean, sometimes I resent buying my ungrateful dog her actual dog food. Nevertheless, Silly Rabbit felt personally connected with the man's story as it resonated with her past in multiple different ways. The man posted to Reddit saying a huge thank you to the website and its users for being so supportive about his situation. So moving on to May 2009, Silly Rabbit took in the man to give him a helping hand, but she did put a deadline on the stay and some pretty fair ground rules. For instance, the cut-off date was to be the end of April, no heavy drinking, and to be regularly looking for work and just generally helping out around the apartment where it was needed. Obviously he agreed to the terms and stayed with Rabbit. Unfortunately, according to some pretty harrowing and detailed posts made by Silly Rabbit in May 2009, the agreement wasn't exactly upheld. Rabbit goes on to explain that she has now kicked him out after a disagreement between the two, purely down to his behaviour and lack of forthcoming. First off, he was barely looking for any work, he had a raging alcoholic addiction and was even hiding empty bottles of various spirits around the apartment, and he had an internet addiction on top of all of that. Rabbit says that he would spend all day and night on the internet browsing rubbish and not looking for a job. He basically never left the place. She does explain that at the start he was a good guest, helping out around the house and whatnot, but the underlying problem obviously outweighed just simply taking out the rubbish. Eventually he began to lie to Rabbit about the drinking, about the work situation, and even possibly about a truck that he had or didn't have. I don't know, it's a whole story in itself. Rabbit kicked Patrick out in the end, but she did call him up after the altercation to make sure he was okay. At the start, before all of this, she did actually call up a reference for Patrick, of which the friend obviously gave him a blinding review. If you want to read the full story, the post is still up on Reddit for you all to see, but it just goes to show that not every deed has the best outcome. Sometimes you have to stay in your own lane. Anyway, well done to Silly Rabbit, you deserve a place in Reddit's history. I love this idea, honestly. Yes, it's Secret Santa. We all know what Secret Santa is, don't we? Well, I'm sure we do. Well, imagine that idea, except you expand it to thousands of participants from around the world. Pretty sick, isn't it? The history behind the idea actually comes from a Redditor named Dan McComas and user 5 Days. They thought up the subreddit r/Secret Santa, but the real backbone of the idea was the website that they ran, which was redditgifts.com. Essentially, you would put in your email to sign up and you'd get a random match and then send your Secret Santa gift to your match. Pretty simple, but a great idea within the community. The crazy part of this experiment is the kind of people that were taking part in the Secret Santa and the amount of people that signed up even. Redditors were being matched with Bill Gates, the president of eBay, and just straight up Google even. Incredibly, in their first year in 2009, they had managed to get 4,500 people to sign up, with that growing to an astonishing 212,894 participants by 2014, which was the largest gift exchange in history, and yes, this was officiated 3 separate times by the Guinness Book of World Records. Unfortunately, the story of Reddit Gifts is now over, with the website and the event shutting down in January 2022. There was no real reason given, but some think it may have been a financial decision. This one went from 0 to 100 real quick, but in a good way. So a guy had written on a subreddit r/ about how he had tested positive on a pregnancy test, which you know is pretty fucking weird, right? This is when the mighty forces of Reddit stepped in to let this man know of a potentially life-threatening signal. Apparently, if a man tests positive on a pregnancy test, it could be a sign that he could have testicular cancer. So a pregnancy test detects the hormone HCG, which is produced when the body is developing a placenta. Well, it turns out that some testicular cancers can produce the same hormone. Weird, but cool, well, honestly. It is important to note that urologists or penis doctors do say that you shouldn't rely solely on a test to tell you if you do have cancer, as it is only some cancers that can display the hormone, but it's definitely something to try, maybe, you know, just in case. So the guy, off of the back of Reddit's advice, got tested, and incredibly he did indeed have a tumour in his right ball, which could be removed immediately, and ultimately cured the cancer before it could get any worse. Reddit actually saved a life by reading a pregnancy test intended to be a joke. One thing about this story that kills me is the method in which they gave us an update. It is literally the most 2012 thing I've ever seen. The op of the post expressed his story by way of rage comic. It's quite legendary, honestly. But before I end this, I think it wouldn't be fair without shouting out the top comment on this post, which has 5.7k upvotes telling op about the possible connection. Fair play, Goxilo. And guys, get tested and fondle your nuts. It may save your life. Handheld game fan, or Kevin, is a fanatic about retro games and all things handheld, hence the name. There is another side of handheld game fan which he wears with pride, and that is he is a disabled gamer, or more specifically he has cerebral palsy. Having cerebral palsy hasn't held Kevin back when it comes to his life. He's married, he has a child, and he makes content for YouTube, currently boasting 76,000 subscribers. So anyway, onto the story. Back in 2017, Kevin uploaded a video called My GoFundMe to help with wheelchair van repairs, where he explains that his wheelchair accessible van had broken down and that he couldn't afford to fix the issue. But having just over 1,000 subscribers at the time, he didn't hold out much hope and thought he could create the video for his friends and families to donate to his cause. But out of nowhere, his 1,000 subscribers had other ideas. The first round of donations come from his most dedicated followers. They had managed to raise over $1,000 to his cause. Kevin showed his shock and gratitude to his fans by releasing an update video, but the community didn't stop there. The internet, being the internet, quickly spread the story and it made its way over to Reddit, where it was picked up in the r/videos category, quickly being upvoted to the top and eventually jumping over to the front page of Reddit, where potentially millions may have seen the post. What happened next knocked Kevin sideways. Ultimately, he found it hard to understand. Collectively, Reddit had managed to raise just shy of $49,000, an incredible outcome, honestly, when the target was just 5,000. So what happened after? Well, through the kindness of a stranger, even despite the money that had been raised, a mechanic from Reddit actually offered Kevin to fix his van free of charge. So fair play to Triton V8 guy. After the van was fixed, it ran for a while, but unfortunately it wasn't long after the van broke again, which tends to happen with cars. Once one thing goes, it all starts to go. So Kevin decided to get rid and instead opt for a regular car, but with the money raised, he had the idea of buying a brand new controllable wheelchair that is compatible with every car, making his option far cheaper than having to buy an accessible vehicle. He also spent some money on his brother who is blind by getting him a braille note taker and other items that improve both of their lives. In another video, he and his wife Stephanie expressed their gratitude and nodding at the generosity of Reddit, explaining that they will now be able to do the things they never even thought would be possible. Oh, and of course, he bought himself a Nintendo Switch, which I think is fair so he can write it off as an expense for his YouTube channel, right? Anyway, a completely wholesome story of a bunch of strangers bounding together to create a little bit of happiness for somebody who really needed it at the time. So yeah, hello to Kevin, Stephanie and their child. Hazel Hammersley appeared to be a happy little 2-year-old girl, like any other. Unfortunately for Hazel, she was sadly diagnosed with a neuroblastoma tumour which was in her abdomen. With this diagnosis, she had to endure months of treatment in the Los Angeles Children's Hospital. From the blogs and news reports, she was constantly happy, playing night and day, playing hide and seek and all sorts with the staff. One day, when in room 4112, her mum and nan, Lauren and Linda, decided to have a little fun and use medical tape to write a message to the outside world, which read, "Send pizza, room 4112. Obviously not expecting anything to come of it as just a small joke, until a random Redditor that goes by the name of A Short Story Long snapped a picture of the DIY sign and uploaded it to r/funny, and Reddit done its thing. The hospital received well over 20 pizzas within that time, even feeding the staff in a little impromptu pizza party. On the Reddit post, Hazel's uncle and her mum commented to say thank you to all the generosity of the strangers in a bid to brighten up one little girl's day. So what happened after the pizza party? Well, it's not the best news we could hope for, honestly. Shortly after, the hospital claimed that they had managed to remove 98% of the neuroblastoma, leaving only a scar behind of what should have been a distant memory for Hazel at only 2.5 years old. In the following years, Lauren, Hazel's mum, kept a journal of how Hazel's journey was going. It seemed like things were on the up for Hazel, and for 2.5 years, she was absolutely fine and enjoyed her life, until sadly, she was diagnosed again, and this is for the third time in her short time on this earth. Hazel Hammersley sadly passed away on the 30th of March 2018, surrounded by her family and the ones that loved her the most, but she will always be a ray of sunshine for the bravery she showed in such a difficult situation at such a young age. Truly something you cannot even imagine going through as a parent or even as a child. All love to Lauren and the Hammersley family. The next story resulted in a young woman being banned from literally 20% of the entirety of the United States, which is honestly insane when you think about it. But what did she do? Well, I bet you would never guess. So, Creepy Tings, or otherwise known as Casey Knockett, was an online artist that mainly worked off of Tumblr, the angsty e-girl website of the internet, and also a little bit of Instagram. Casey's whole thing is that she would execute her fine art on rocks, boulders and other areas in nature which didn't seem to be too problematic on the surface, but what was problematic was the location of said rocks. She would choose to deface the surfaces of the rocks found in national parks of America, which are subsequently owned and maintained by the government. This is now a crime and a case for vandalism for defacing property. So in 2014, October, a post was uploaded to Reddit's subreddit r/Yosemite by a user named Yosemite80, and the post read, "Graffiti artist with no regard for her actions leaves her art on the Vernal Falls Stock Trail." This is the first post to strike Reddit's attention to Creepy Tings and her rock art, and it wasn't a positive one. Enter Steve Yu. Steve is an investigator for the Yosemite National Park, so naturally he starts to, investigate, and this is all off the back of what Reddit has already collated for Steve. Interestingly, Casey was hardly anonymous, having links to pretty much led you straight to her personal Facebook. Acquiring her name and rough location was almost too easy. Once Casey caught wind of this and became aware of the investigation, she decided to private all of her socials to try and cover her trail of art crime. But it was too late. The investigation was incredibly thorough, with evidence being collected from her social media, interviews from Casey and her family, and of course the drawings themselves. After 2 years, Casey was finally charged with 7 misdemeanor charges of injury and depredation to government property. She was sentenced to a ban from all national parks in the USA and given 200 hours of community service. But this was off of the back of a plea deal. The actual charge could have demanded far more severe consequences, including a maximum fine of $700,000 and 7 years behind bars. So in terms of the sentence, she was let off pretty light. So Casey learnt a lesson, and I'm sure she would never repeat it again. Well, if she did, she wouldn't be allowed to anyway, because she's not allowed to step inside any of the parks. So yeah. This story is a true testament to the generosity of Reddit. Omari worked in an orphanage which is located in Ngong, Kenya, when one night he had woke up to 3 guys standing around him with machetes. But this wasn't the first time the orphanage had been robbed. Nope, it was actually the 4th that month. The previous night, the orphanage had suffered their 3rd burglary that month, but Omari had woken up to a sound, which turned out to be 3 thieves. So he went all Assassin's Creed style and creeped around the orphanage until he found them. He took a hammer and pretty much beat them out of the place. So fast forward a day, and this is when the incident took place. The 3 men came back to get revenge on him, so they ambushed him in the night, but little did they know, Omari had a secret weapon concealed under his bed. He reaches under and pulls out what can only be as described as Thor's hammer, but for thieves, and he fucking wailed on them, forcing them out again, even despite them having machetes. When they were outside, Omari turned around to console the children, which were understandably scared. And when he turned back around, the machete was swung, and he had taken a machete straight to the side of his face, but he didn't go down straight away. This triggered his fight or flight reaction, and Jesus Christ, he chose fight and f***ed the guy up. He walked back and locked the door so he could be treated for his injuries, which were very severe, causing a huge amount of blood loss. A truly special man. 2 days after the event, a post was submitted to Reddit from a user called The Lake, where they showed us the injuries and explained the situation at hand, with the idea of raising some money for a little better security considering the amount of attacks these children and staff had had to endure. The idea was to build a large wall tipped with barbed wire in an attempt to deter such scumbags from trying it again. As a pattern with these posts, it blew up, bringing in support from around the world and even attracted people that had even worked and met Omari, creating the brightest references you could even ask for. I can't even get a reference from my previous employer. The original goal was for $2,000, and that goal was very quickly overtaken, with the final number reaching $80,000. So what did Omari and the orphanage do with the cash injection? Well, another Reddit post was created just a month later showcasing that much needed wall was actually actually built, but obviously this was just a drop in the ocean for the orphanage. 1 year later, The Lake uploaded another post with an update of all the things that the orphanage had invested in, and it is quite the list and life-changing changes for the children and staff of the orphanage, from bunk beds for the children to an improved food menu, allowing the kids to get a well-balanced diet, to even hiring 3 more members of staff. The full list is on screen now. So it goes to show you that your generosity really can change lives of the people that really do need and deserve it. Without the bravery of Amari, who knows what could have happened to these children. So well done, Amari. You are a shining example. In one of the biggest stories of the internet from 2023, we see Reddit being the good guy and the bad guy in a way. It was a battle between the people of Reddit and the people who run it. I'm sure you know all about it, but in the words of Craig David, let me fill you in. Let's just say the real war in the controversy was between Reddit and the many third-party apps that are used to access Reddit. So, for a developer of one of these apps, you need to use the API, or Application Programming Interface, which since 2008 had been free to use. However, for some reason, Reddit decided that they would make the change for future use for all of these apps. But the amount of money they demanded were less than reasonable in the eyes of the developers and to the public. To give you an idea of the fees that this change may have demanded, take Apollo for example. They were the biggest third-party app in the game. They were quoted $12,000 for 50 million requests. So what does that equate to? Well, that basically means they would have to cough up $20 million per year to continue running the app, which quite obviously wasn't going to happen. The only type of apps that would receive an exemption would be accessibility focused apps and non-commercial. Every other app would be expected to pay the fees or essentially shut down forever. So what was the justification for all this? Well, a spokesman for Reddit released a statement that read, "Clarify any confusion around our data API terms, platform-wide policies, community support resources, and timing for the new moderator tools." He added that Reddit needs to be fairly paid to continue supporting high usage third-party apps, noting that the new API pricing is based on usage levels that we measure to be comparable on our own costs. Thrashmit also stated that Reddit's hosting costs were in the multi-millions. So how did Reddit respond to these changes? This is when they organised the blackout. And as you remember, actually 7,000 subreddits took part initially and went private from the 12th to the 14th of June 2023. And some of these Reddits were the largest communities on the site, like r/funny, r/r, r/gaming, and even Star Wars for some reason. The number of some Reddits quickly rose to 8,500 by the following day. Unfortunately, the blackouts didn't really have the desired effects, and by the 15th of June, an internal note was leaked which showed that the expected blackout day will simply blow over with very little financial effect, despite creating a fair amount of trouble. Several subreddits remained private to continue the protest as the cause came under scrutiny for having a time limit on it, as obviously the big bods of Reddit knew that there would be an end to the debacle. Reddit told the community that if they didn't make the subreddits public again, they would just consider replacing the entire moderation team. Pretty brutal bullying tactics, to be honest. They did in fact have to do this on a few occasions where the mods wouldn't budge. Reddit once again retaliated in a clever way by opening the subreddit once again off of the back of their underhanded threats, but with a twist. They would change the subreddit to not safe for work and uploaded naughty things to prevent advertisers being able to advertise on there. Kind of genius, to be honest. So did the efforts work? Unfortunately no. The API changes still went through, and as expected, almost every third-party app no longer exists, with Apollo shutting down on the 30th of June 2023. A valiant effort to rise up against the overlords, but sadly, we lost. 15 years ago, a post was submitted to the subreddit r/SuicideWatch by a user called Nemod, which was titled, "Goodbye, I can't take this pain anymore." In the description, they go on to say that they had taken a load of sedatives and other pills to unalive themselves. So Reddit got to work desperately trying to dig up any kind of information they possibly could to try and track down the lost soul and bring them back down to earth. They started by trawling through his Reddit account to try and find any kind of personal information that would help them find other profiles. Luckily, they did draft up some leads. They also asked Reddit admins to try and pull Ops' IP IP address, where they did confirm that they were on it. In the background, the investigation continued with a paste bin being set up to share Nebod's personal information in order to track down a location or even a number. A little while after, we started to see the updates pour in. We got an update that shows us that the police had been made aware, and later on they had confirmed which hospital Op was being treated in and when he was discharged even. In the same post, luckily, we had even got a comment from Nemod's mum to confirm that he did in fact take the overdose, but he was doing okay. So mission accomplished. 12 days later, we heard from Nemod again, where he made the post, "Thanks Reddit." He expresses a huge thanks to the Reddit detectives, and he makes a funny remark about some of the ancient websites that they managed to dig up during the search. The comments were filled with relief and plenty of inspirational words from his newfound fan. Beyond this point, as his profile has now been deleted, it seems it's quite hard to track down what he's up to now. But I wish him all the best, and well done to Reddit for once again swooping in to help a Redditor that was down on his luck. The story starts in the year 1995. On the 26th of June, the Greensville County Police were called out to investigate a VW camper that had swerved off the road and had hit a tree. After a look inside the van, they found two bodies of two young men. Interestingly, they were both wearing similar t-shirts, a tie-dye design with the band logo for the Grateful Dead. The band were previously performing a live show in Washington, DC, which would give the police an indication of who and where these guys have been. Upon further investigation, 2 tickets were found which corroborated the link. With no evidence of drugs or foul play, the police had instead come to the conclusion that the driver probably fell asleep at the wheel. So who were these young men? Well, the police managed to find an identity card for the driver, which turned out to be Michael Hager, but there was no evidence to work out who the passenger's identity except a small handwritten note which read, "Jason, sorry we had to go. I'll see you around. Call me," and then the number, Caroline T and O. The police suspected that the unknown man named Jason was probably a hitchhiker and not connected to Michael directly, but instead becoming friends while on the road together. Unfortunately, despite the police checking every avenue of Jason's identity, they were unable to find any kind of match. His face was too heavily damaged, his fingerprints didn't match anything in the national database, and the handwritten note didn't lead to anybody, so any lead was pretty much ruled out. So it went down as just another cold case with a John Doe, or Grateful Doe, due to the attire he was wearing at the time of the incident. So where is this all going? Well, the year is 2012 and things are about to spice up with this cold case of 17 years. Due to the injuries to Jason's face, the photos were never released, but as technology has significantly improved, the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children had released a facial reconstruction of Jason for the internet to see, in hopes of sparking a new lead. Well, the internet investigators got excited. Originally, the search began on Facebook pages before hitting the big leagues of Reddit, or one particular Redditor, Zombie Grey, or now known as Metal Grey, or even Layla as her real name. Grey Metal was uniquely interested in this case when the generated face of Jason was released, seemingly determined to get to the bottom of it. A subreddit was set up dedicated to finding the identity of the Grateful Doe, and Grey Metal was a founder. Being a case with very little detail, Grey decided to create an Imgur post in 2015 with all the various details that had been collated for Jason. From there, the idea was to get the image to spread as far and as wide as possible in hopes that somebody from the 1990s would recognise the photos or details. Luckily, it went viral, reaching every part of the internet, causing intrigue from around the globe, when eventually, against all odds, they struck a lead. Layla received a private message from a guy called Steve. Steve had claimed that the man in the photo looked like his roommate from when he lived in Illinois, and stated his name was Jason Callahan. He even corroborated the note found at the scene from the 2 Carolines. With all these details hitting a close and probable match, the situation seemed to be on the up. With the last name being thrown into the mix, the collective sleuths decided to continue down the road of trying to figure out if there was a living connection, when out of the blue, a lady named Margaretta Evans responded to one of Jason's missing posters on Facebook, saying that she is in fact the mum of Jason Callahan. She wrote that they had been looking for him all this time with no luck. Sadly, Margaretta explains that Jason had left home to live a more free-spirited lifestyle and explore the country, while also following his favourite band, Grateful Dead. She last saw him in 1995, the year he vanished. There was no missing persons reports filed, as in the family's eyes, he was an adult that left home on his own own accord, so the reasons or span of time he was gone for wasn't considered mysterious. After finding the post, Margareta files a police report and the case is back open. The police ask for a DNA sample to help prove the connection and finally identify the Grateful Doe. This is when Shannon Callahan stepped forward. She was Jason's half-sister who had also been shown the missing persons poster and divulged into how similar the photo resembled her father. She knew at that point it had to be Jason. Shannon submitted her DNA for the testing at the end of 2015, so now the wait was on. In fact, the entire internet and Jason's family waited an entire year for the results to come back, and when they did, it shook the community. It was a match. This meant that the true identity of the missing man stayed hidden for over 20 years. It was in fact Jason Patrick Callahan of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, who was 19 at the time of the incident. So amazingly, when all else fails, you can usually count on the sleuths of the internet to pull through and get results even when the odds are against them. On the 9th of August 2018, Susan Rainwater, aged 63, would jump on a bicycle and begin her morning ride down the scenic roads of Route 7. A popular journey with local residents. At around 9:30 am, Susan was riding on the side of the road when she was hit from behind by a car which had flung her off of the road and into the grass, obviously causing severe injuries, while the car simply drove away in a callous hit and run. This would ultimately cost Susan her life. Susan had been gone for over an hour at this point, with her husband getting worried, until a neighbour found an abandoned bike near her driveway, and after searching the area, she had unfortunately found the body of Susan, so she called the police right away. When the state troopers got to the scene, they started gathering evidence, but unluckily for them, there was very little evidence to go by. There was only small fragments of bodywork from a car, a small chunk of black plastic, and of course the bicycle itself. The police had come to the conclusion that the incident was in fact a hit and run, so the hunt for the driver began. But where to start? With such an underwhelming amount of evidence, it seemed like an impossible task. There were no witnesses or CCTV that they could even tap into. So instead, to get the ball rolling in the background, they issued a tweet to see if anybody would be able to identify the mysterious black piece of plastic. Unbeknownst to the state trooper, the image would go viral, erupting a slurry of internet sleuths to find the culprit. This is where the subreddit "What is this thing?" comes in. This is literally what these guys are bred for, right? So the subreddit gets to work with some early theories not quite hitting the mark, like it looks like a piece of trim on the bottom of a rocker or a decorative plate holder, until the guess got slightly closer with a headlight bezel and the notch being used for the adjustment. Now let's bring in Jeff Nuts, who is seemingly a god of headlight bezels. Jeff explains almost the exact model of the car the piece must have come from and where the plastic had snapped off from. It is the headlight bezel from a 1988 Chevy Silverado, he wrote. But how does he know in just such great detail? Well, Jeff is actually a state inspector for the condition of cars, and part of the checks is to look at the headlight adjustments, and after a little bit more extra research and homework, he concluded that it is 100% from that vehicle. With this information, it was passed down to the state trooper that put the tweet out, but with no immediate reply. The community was desperate for an update until just 5 days after the incident which led Susan Rainwater to lose her life, the police had confirmed that they had caught a suspect that appeared to tick every single box. The tweet even credited the information about the plastic chunk to Reddit. Incredibly, Jeff was right. A 1986 Chevy K10 was pulled over with damage to the right-hand headlight, which turned out to be the driver involved in the hit-and-run case. Jeremy Simon was arrested for vehicular homicide, illegal drug possession, and leaving the scene of a crash. Simon did try and claim that he fell asleep at the wheel and thought he had hit a deer, but shortly after, his story changed, later saying that he knew he had hit somebody but he didn't want to see his body. They also found heroin on Simon when he was arrested. Ultimately, the sentencing for Simon led to 4.5 years in a drug offenders sentencing alternative, which basically means he'll serve half of the sentence in a prison and the other half on supervised probation. Not really the sentence he deserved, honestly, but hey, that was the time Reddit brought down a hit-and-run drug user into justice with only one photo of a small piece of plastic. Oh man, you know what's coming. Wall Street bets. One of the biggest stories of sticking it to the man to ever come from the internet. The top comment of Andre Tobea's video perfectly sums up the whole event by saying, imagine studying the stock market for literal years and losing billions to people who call them stonks. Absolutely, Andre. So what actually happened in this story for David against Goliath? GameStop, as you may know, is a public limited company, which basically means they float on the stock market, so the public can buy and sell a percentage of the company, which will fluctuate depending on the state of the company's finances. The idea is actually to grow your company with the cash injection of each stock that is bought, creating profit for the company and the stockholder. Simple enough to understand, right? Well, as you know, the stock market isn't exactly always fair. In the markets you have whales, which are hedge funds or big players that hold a lot of money in their funds, and with such large assets under their control, it's easy to simply manipulate the market. So enter GameStop. In the stock market, something called short selling exists, and what that basically means is to bet against the company doing well. But instead of failing, this massively damages a company if the resistance on the upward side isn't strong enough to counter the effects of the shorting. The Wolves of Wall Street did exactly that to GameStop. They began shorting the GME stock until there was 5 times more short stocks, which were driving the value of GameStop into the wrong direction. This was picked up by a Redditor called Senior Hedgehog on the now infamous Wall Street Bets subreddit. The subreddit is basically the Wild West for stock market investing, where the participants proudly show off their degenerate status with their insane bets. Honestly, it's a pretty cool subreddit, but it's got to be said, there are very rarely any real wins here, with mostly just people throwing money onto high risk margin trades, meaning the risks are extremely high and almost never ended well. So, Senior Hedgehog, in his post, he explains all the reasons why GME is a steal at the moment due to these short sellers dogpiling on the company, pretty much opening an opportunity to band together and grab the stocks at such a low price. At one point, the short stocks actually outweighed the amount of stocks that were even in circulation, creating a financial paradox, which would turn out to be the greedy bankers' downfall. Wall Street Bets collectively worked together to exploit the shorting that was going on via the Robinhood app, and what they created with the investing app was what's called a short squeeze, a tactic usually used in the more traditional bigwigs of Wall Street themselves, only this time they were on the receiving end. With every purchase and increase in stock price, the Wall Street bankers would lose money hand over fist. They had lent out 90 million shares at around $5 to $10 per stock. This now had to be paid back to the new stock owners at an increasing and impeccably large number, from up to $400 per share, meaning that at their peak they had lost 19.75 billion, yes, with a B. This one event alone almost caused the entire stock market to crash due to the incredible sum of losses made from the hedge funds. So when all seemed to be going well in the name of chaos, Robinhood, the trading app, decided to put a temporary ban on the buying ability of the GME stock, essentially siding with Wall Street themselves. This was all in a bid to allow the stock market to correct itself, a move universally hated by the internet, as you can imagine. Interestingly, showing the contrast between the meaning of Robinhood, shouldn't they all be behind stealing from the rich and giving to the poor? Well, apparently not. The supporters of GameStop continued rallying together, boasting about their huge gains, but one part of the community remains true, and that's the wave of diamond hands. Diamond hands is a term conjured up by the subreddit to show your allegiance not only to your fat profits, but the activism behind it, i.e. taking down Wall Street. Diamond hands was a show of balls of steel by showing you would not even sell if you was 100k up or 100k down. The money is unimportant, and many Wall Street bet enjoyers did exactly that. They held their positions until the bitter end, but of course many people did sell at the top and even on the way up. And I've got to say, I agree, giving it to the man and all that, but boy, I loved money. I would have sold. Typical paper hands here. The aftermath of the story of GME spawned other meme stocks like AMC and Bed Bath & Beyond, which experienced similar but slightly smaller short squeezes in relative success. Surely this story is the #1 biggest impact Reddit has had on the world. They were a gnat's cock away from collapsing the stock market. Beat that, Twitter. That was the time Reddit beat a bunch of billionaires. In this part of the video, I just want to say thank you to my pinned comment on my previous video by NukiNak2944, and he said, I thought this was some 1 million subscriber channel because of how well edited and formatted this video was. Keep up the good work, King. Another comment by a long-term OG subscriber, HackE444, he said, 4chan is truly a place where every morning people flip a coin to decide if they want to be good, upstanding citizen of society or the most sadistic, moustache twirling villain you could imagine. And the final comment I want to show you is from someone called Ryan Smith with some letters letters and numbers at the end. Just want to put, I'm the 707th subscriber. I just wanted to be here for the long history of this channel. Keep going, man. Your videos are awesome. Thank you very much, Ryan. Thank you all for the comments, though. I just want to say I do read every single comment, so please keep them going. But you know, if you want to be in these sort of shout outs, then well, you never know. But if not, then just comment shut the fuck up, Sane, and I'll get the picture. So this is another long video from me, but I hope you enjoyed. Well, I mean, you watched this far, so it can't be that bad unless you're a little bit weird, and just watch things that you don't enjoy. Well, anyway, I have a Patreon now that I have literally no one subscribed to, so go and be my first so I can retire from my day job. Thanks, and bye bye.